Welcome to the Robotics Through Science Fiction podcast. I'm Robin Murphy, and here's a guide to robots in the 2019 Hugo Award nominees. So, the Hugo Awards have been around since 1953. They're named after the publisher Hugo Gernsback, who's considered the father of magazine science fiction, or perhaps the father of really good pulp fiction. Hugos are selected by fans who pay money to register for the Worldcon. They don't have to attend Worldcon, they just have to pay the registration fee. Whereas the other big sci-fi awards, the Nebulas, are voted on by members of the Science Fiction Writers Guild. The Hugos and the Nebulas are like at the movies. The Hugos would be for the popular eat a lot of popcorn movies that Roger Ebert liked, and the Nebulas are for the more intellectual or foreign films that Gene Siskel would like. There's often overlap between nominees, of course, and really, really great work wins both awards. So, the 2019 Hugos, how are robots portrayed? Well, in general, robots can either be a main character or a critical prop in a story, or they can appear as sprinklings of scientific verisimilitude to give the fiction some sci-fi street cred. 4 Hugo nominees incorporate robots as a main character: Revenant Gun, Artificial Condition, The Tea Master and the Detective, and The Proud Robot. In addition, a nonfiction book, Astounding, John W. Campbell, Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, L. Ron Hubbard, and the Golden Age of Science Fiction, describes how Asimov came up with his robot stories. One Hugo nominee, Record of a Spaceborne Few, touches on the economic consequences of robots, and 2 others mention robots. Space Opera, the best book Douglas Adams never wrote, has a robot species entered in the singing competition, and The Calculating Stars, which is an alternative history of the space program, mentions planetary rovers. Let's look at the nominees, plus some bestsellers that did not get a Hugo nod, but may be of interest. Best Novel nominee, Revenant Gun. Revenant Gun by Hoon-Ha Lee is the 3rd book in the Machineries of Empire series, a classic military space opera, only with more quantum mechanics and quantum entailment. There's a civil war where one side has a famous general assassin downloaded into a woman's body, and the other has a copy in a man's body. Both downloads are partial, reflecting different times and memories. Each side in the Civil War has sentient robot servitors, but the main robot character, Hemiole, seems to exist only as a plot device to handle exposition. Since he's been in de facto storage for about a century, he has to ask a lot of questions, thus bringing the reader up to speed in whatever is going on. A bit disappointing. As the Hugo Award-winning writer Michael Swanwick once told me, robots should be different than us. That's what makes them interesting. See the RTF's discussion of robotics in Revenant Gun and also its predecessor, Raven's Stratagem. Best Novella, Artificial Condition, and The Tea Master and the Detective. If you like robots and AI, you can't go wrong with either of these 2 Best Novella nominees. They are great in very different ways. Artificial Condition is the 2nd volume of Martha Wells' wildly amusing Murderbot Diaries, the story of an autonomous, snarky robot security guard who would rather be watching entertainment feeds than dealing with pesky humans. What's interesting is that those entertainment feeds really could influence a robot's development. Pro tip, read the series in order. The Tea Master and the Detective is a serious mystery where Eliade de Bodard imagines a very different version of Holmes and Watson in a Vietnamese space orbital. Watson is a mind ship, but the real robot stars are the mobile wearable robots that store themselves in cuffs and pockets and even make themselves into necklaces. So see the RTSF discussion of the science in Artificial Condition, as well as the interview with Martha Wells, and also check out the discussion of the science of mobile wearable robots in the Tea Master and the Detective here. Best Related Work nominee, Astounding, John W. Campbell, Isaac Asimov, Robert A. Heinlein, L. Ron Hubbard, and the Golden Age of Science Fiction. Astounding is, well, astounding. It's both a history of the formative years of science fiction in its preeminent pulp publication and biographies of the intertwined fates of the field's most influential editor, Campbell, his top two writers, Asimov and Heinlein, how Asimov came to write his robot series, and, very scary, how Scientology, through a partnership between Campbell and Hubbard, came to be. Engaging, fascinating, and eventually bittersweet as you see how four people change over time, sometimes not for the best. Campbell was the Norman Lear of his day. Instead of creating a stable of popular TV shows with pointed political messages, he fostered a stable of popular sci-fi writers who incorporated his view of the world and science into their stories and books. Just like so many great shows can be traced back to the X-Files, Vince Gilligan for Breaking Bad, David Nutter for Game of Thrones, James Wong for American Horror Story, Frank Spotnik, The Man in the High Castle, to name a few. Pretty much everything and everyone in U.S. science fiction was involved in some way with Astounding. See the RTS interview with the author Alec Neville Lee. 1994 retrospective Best Novelette Hugo nominee, The Proud Robot. The Proud Robot's a madcap mess of a story about a too-cool-for-school scientist who invents a robot while drunk. The twist is that the robot is a complete narcissist and out of control, distracting the scientist, Gallagher, from remembering a solution to a critical problem. It's in the vein of Butcher's QUR and Robo Inc., but with nothing to say about robots. The Proud Robot was credited to Louis Paget, the same husband-wife team that actually wrote the profound Mimsy Were the Borogroves, but it was actually a solo project from the husband, Henry Cutter. You can read the story online, and if you like it, there's a whole series of stories featuring the drunk scientist Gallagher. See the RTS discussion about it, but there's not much science to be had. The short story QUR has humorous drunk scientist, but it touches on the realities of robot designs, so you may want to look at that RTSF review. Robot books that weren't nominated for a Hugo. 3 best-selling novels with robots were not nominated. John Scalzi's Head On is the second in his series about a world where a minority of people paralyzed by a virus physically interact with the rest of the world through teleoperated surrogate robots. We follow FBI Chris Shane as he or she, we are never told and can't tell, conduct a police procedural while dealing with uncharged batteries. Classic Scalzi, funny, thought-provoking, and overall, yeah, that'd be about how people would react having 1 in 10 people working through a telecommuting robot. See the RTF's discussion of Locked In and Head On and the science of telerobotics. The Robots of Gotham. That was written by Tom McAulty, exploiting his day job in machine learning. A bit of game-lit setup, but the hard science of how to counter nasty drones and pervasive surveillance is worth the read. Plus, it's kind of sobering to think that countries like Venezuela could probably leapfrog the U.S. in artificial intelligence if the U.S. imposes the wrong kind of regulations. See the RTSF discussion of the Robots of Gotham and how even drones have blind spots in their computer vision systems. Only Human is the third and final installment in the Themis File series by Sylvain Neuvel about a large, overly complex, piloted mecha alien robot. In the first book, the protagonist finds one left behind by the aliens. In later books, the aliens come back with upgraded versions and lots of weapons. Like Pacific Rim, it's a case study of how not to do a human-robot interface, but it does provide an opportunity to talk about how robots would be programmed through schema theory. See the RTSF discussion of Only Human and schemas. Hugos with teachable moments. So the Hugo nominees offer some entertaining opportunities to explore important topics in science. So here's a list of the RTSF discussion of the science of robots in this year's nominees. Learning by demonstration. Check out Artificial Condition, where we see that entertainment media can really influence how people and robots treat each other. Software engineering. Artificial Condition is about bad software engineering. Plus, there's the interview with author Martha Wells, who talks about that. Ethics of job displacement. Record of a Spaceborne Few really doesn't feature robots, but it frames the debate over robots and job displacement in a way that's very relevant to the here and now.